It's about my relationship with myself and being kinder to myself, being more gentle with myself when I am alone. I think being alone so much during this pandemic is really like what is my real relationship with myself? What is it?
Who are you?
I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller.
In telling stories about gay characters.
The world was filled with people who occupy different intersections of otherness.
And I was fortunate enough to get in front of creative teams that were woke enough to see my light, to have conversations with others.
Who is this biracial angel?
Trans women and trans men.
I celebrate myself. Celebrate yourself and love each other.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of JBC Presents Conversations with Others. I'm Jeffrey Bowyer-Chapman. I am so happy to be sitting down in conversation with today's guest. She's someone who I've adored for many years and have been consistently blown away by her numerous and endlessly impressive list of professional achievements, setting a whole new standard in the entertainment industry, all the while being used for a purpose greater than herself and blazing a trail for others to follow. She is an Emmy award-winning producer, a globally celebrated actress, a singer, a dancer, and the epitome of what it means to be a phenomenal woman. And now, for the simplest and most complex question of all, who are you?
Who am I? Oh, I think that is the existential question of most of our lives. And I might say something different every day. And for me, it is different every day. Today, Laverne Cox is trying to embrace imperfection. That's really the piece. I think about, I have a birthday coming up in a few weeks. I'm going to be 48 years old. And in so many ways, I feel like I should have things figured out, and everything should be so clear. And I don't have things figured out. I'm on a journey of self-discovery, and it's an artistic journey. It's a journey to become more of who I am. So I think the answer today about who Laverne Cox is a person on a journey to become more authentically herself, to become a better artist, a better human being, and to really connect with, align with, and achieve what my higher power wants for me on this planet. That is who I am today. I'm on this journey trying to better align myself with my higher power's purpose for me. I'm trying to get out of my way as much as possible so that I can do that.
Oof, girl, it is a constant evolution of self. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard years ago from Mary J. Blige saying, "Once you get out of your own way, you will be unstoppable."
Amen. Amen. Yeah, I think that is the thing. And I've been trying to use this sort of quarantine, corona situation to have some spiritual growth and to become more spiritually enlightened and to have some personal growth. And I've been listening a lot to this guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he talks a lot about do you know Dr. Joe?
Girl, can you see me flipping out right now?
I do. So I'm like, oh, you know Dr. Joe?
Obsessed with Dr. Joe Dispenza. That You Are the Placebo. His meditations are life-changing.
It's amazing. And this whole thing that he talks about around, we can't, create the life that we want using the personality of who we used to be, that we have to become a new person. And that we have to sort of, get out of our own way. He, in a very scientific way, he talks about getting out of our own way and having, if we don't have a vision of the future, we're stuck with the memories of the past. One of my favorite quotes of his, because it really is about how do we, what I'm balancing now with his work is not being in denial about the challenges of now, the challenges of my past, but then also trying to have that vision of my future that I'm creating in the moment, right? That I need to have. I need to allow myself to have my feelings and my emotions about things and not be in denial, but then also be in this space in the present, creating the life that I want to have in the future with the gratitude in the present of it already having happened. You know what I'm talking about. I don't know if people out there will know what we're talking about.
It all starts somewhere, right? I mean, his practices are very, as spiritual and esoteric as they are, they're also very much rooted in neuroscience. And it's about like changing the neural pathways in your brain and starting to implement new habits and ways of thinking and the way that we operate in the world in order to become a new person. Because you can't, like you said, you can't manifest a new life based on the beliefs and habits and old patterns of behavior that may have served us at one point in our life, but we're constantly evolving as a species. So at some point you just have to keep moving, as he says. How did you discover Joe Dispenza?
A friend of mine, Lewis Howes, did an interview with him, and I saw the clip of it on Instagram, and I was like, oh, this feels like the truth. And then I watched that interview with Lewis, and then I was like, oh, this is great. And then I went about my life, and then a few months ago he came up again. And then I was like, and then I looked into the work again earlier this year, and I was like, okay, I need this. And it very much is related to the work that I've been doing, the somatic work I've been doing with my therapist for the past almost 4 years. That again is about resetting the nervous system. It's about creating new neurotransmitters in our nervous system. And it's a trauma-based, the somatic work that I'm doing is based in community resiliency model, and it's trauma-based. But it's about create these new neurotransmitters. So it's very much related to the work that I've already been doing. And so it's sort of a different approach to work I've already been doing that I'm really enjoying. The deep thing about trauma is that it can be passed down. It's epigenetics is what it's called, that we can pass down trauma, that it can happen in utero, but then there's other evidence that suggests it can be passed down intergenerationally, right? I hear stories about my grandfather on plantations in Alabama, and it hits me in a way that just the violence that he experienced, I'm like, oh my God, I feel it so strongly. And so the work of undoing trauma, it's really intense work, but I think it's so necessary. And I think it's work that the world really needs right now. I think so much of what is going on in America globally, even before the coronavirus, was about trauma. I think I've said this multiple times. I think that like a citizenry cannot witness particularly Black people being murdered on camera over and over and over again, right? We have seen Black people murdered by police, by citizens on camera over and over again. That is traumatizing. And I think that is collectively traumatizing. The collective trauma, Tarana Burke talks about the collective trauma of the Me Too, of the reckoning that happened around Me Too, that all of this trauma sort of boiled to the surface in this collective trauma. And we're all sort of traumatized by it. And what are we going to do with the trauma? And I don't know if we collectively, let alone individually, but obviously we start with individuals, but individually finding ways to build resilience, right, to trauma, building new neurotransmitters, new ways of knowing and being and healing from trauma. But then how do we begin to do it collectively? I don't know if I have the answer to this, but how do we begin to do it collectively? And that is something Brene Brown talks a little bit about it in Braving the Wilderness, but I don't know the answer to that. But I think that's a huge reason so much why we're so divided politically. Obviously, there's a mainstream media that does a lot of work to, sort of propagandize, and this is like on all political sides of the political spectrum. So we have to be clear about that. But I think so much of the reason we're susceptible to that is, well, it's critical thinking, but I think a lot of it's about trauma. So when our nervous systems are aroused, when we're in, biologically, we are formed as human beings. When we're in the woods and we see a threat, if there's a bear in the woods, biologically we go into cortisol is released, adrenaline is released. We have to fight the bear or flee the bear, right? And so I think and that's a trauma response. But then we're not really hardwired to be that way all the time. And I think so many of us are in that fight, flight, or freeze place on so many different levels, and we're reacting it from that place constantly with each other. And none of that's sustainable, like in terms of our own chemistry, in terms of just disease, all the things Dr. Joe talks about, obviously can constantly release stress hormones, can cause disease, can make us sick, but it's keeping us from each other as well. This trauma and this constant sort of state of being in fight, flight, or freeze is keeping us from each other.
Definitely. And I think that you're right. I don't know how, at this point, I don't think anyone has the solution as to how all of us collectively can heal from this trauma, because it does start at an individual level. It does start from within, and it starts with a celebration of self. I remember that's the funny thing is that's the tagline. This podcast, celebrate yourself and love each other. And I was so blown away a couple of years ago when I saw that you had done a collaboration line with Orly, a line of nail polish titled Celebrate Yourself. And so much of that has become my mission statement in a way, because of the trauma that I have experienced in life, just existing in this world as a Black queer male, dealing with individuals and experiences outside of the industry, but also from within the industry, and dealing with a lot of emotional monsters and people who are incredibly emotionally volatile, very dangerous in many ways, or in positions of power. Oftentimes they tend to abuse that power. I guess I've come to the place where I've learned that as much as like the adult me wants to protect the inner child in me by calling out these individuals and by letting the world know that these people are dangerous and this is what they're doing. I think especially in light of Me Too and Time's Up, when we were taking all of these monsters out of the closet, these sexual abusers and these people who have been really taking advantage of their position of power for decades now. And it's not only been allowed, but very much overlooked for many decades in the industry. And so as all of that was happening, and Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein and all of these people were being called out for it, and I started to see people rising up in the ranks who may not necessarily have that taint on their record, but I know very well that they are emotional abusers. I guess I just had this incredible fear. My inner child had this incredible fear that they were going to be the next ones to rise to the top of the mountain. They're going to have the keys to the castle, and then what? Because it's such a harder thing to be able to pinpoint. There's not really any laws around emotional abuse and manipulation on set. So I think the conclusion that I've come to over the past couple of months really is empowering myself and trying to create safe spaces so that I can empower others to be able to draw boundaries, to be able to identify emotional abusers and steps that they can take in order to protect themselves so they don't necessarily fall victim.
Emotional abusers, like most predators, also look for people. They look for the people that they can groom. They look for the people that they can, and it's by no means victim blaming. Any predator, an emotional abuser or a sexual predator, they look for people who are the most vulnerable and the most malleable and the most able to be manipulated. And so then I think so much of, oh my God, I've done so much work around, and when I think about predators, I think it's so much about my dating life and so much about like the men that have come in and out of my life, and like how the predators have been there, and how it's become so important for me in my personal life to like know the signs of someone who is going to be a gaslighter, know the signs of someone who's going to be emotionally abusive in some way, and run in the opposite direction. In a professional situation, that's not always an option, right? When I used to work in restaurants, I had insanely emotionally abusive managers, right? Restaurant managers who were just cruel for no reason, and it made no sense. And the deep thing about that, when I look back on it, it makes me want to cry, is because I couldn't leave those jobs. I was in New York City, a Black transgender woman. A lot of people, as brilliant as Laverne Cox is, a lot of people weren't going to hire me, right? Like I was aware that like with a college degree and all of this loveliness and brilliance, that it was hard for me to get a job as a Black trans woman. So I stayed in jobs with abusive managers. I mean, like crazy stuff, because I didn't have any other options. And there were moments that it was really frustrating. And I don't even, when I think back on it, I felt trapped. It was so unempowering on so many levels. And there's just so much shit I had to eat and so much abuse I had to like sort of deal with just to keep a job and keep a roof over my head. And the only thing I can say about that is I was in therapy at the time, and I was able to, luckily I was able to get out. Everybody's not able to get out of this situation though. But I didn't get out of those situations until like at one point, one restaurant job, I just quit after like 10 years. And it was just, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was just scared. I was like, I quit with no rent to be paid. And then I ended up getting another restaurant job, and it was another similarly. What shifted though, I mean, I think the only thing we can do is we can't keep abuse. I mean, ideally we don't want those people to be in power, and there needs to be accountability, right? So like systems need to change. But in terms of us, how do we disconnect from that? If we're in a situation, how do we like just do everything we can to protect ourselves and our psyches, to know that like whatever this abuse that we're experiencing is not who we are, and that we don't deserve it if we can't leave the situation. Obviously there needs to be accountability, and people shouldn't be behaving that way. But yeah, that's a deep one.
Deep one, honey, you know, and I was simultaneously in a 3.5-year relationship that was very emotionally abusive while working on a television show, dealing with a cast member who was also very emotionally abusive. And it really, it beat me down in many ways. And it took me about a year after coming out of the relationship and off of the TV show, realizing that as challenging as those years may have been and the experiences I had, I learned so many lessons from it, and I can take that experience and somehow relay to the world how I implemented tools of healing and of bettering myself and strengthening myself, and offered those tools to other people in the world, hoping that they can strengthen themselves as well. Because at the end of the day, like I said before, it's an inner job. It starts on the individual level, and we can take down these emotional monsters one by one. But if we don't have the strength to be able to heal ourselves and protect ourselves, at the end of the day, it's really a losing battle.
Yeah, I think it has to be from a place of, if we're in the taking down monsters business, we have to make sure that we are emotionally fortified and have our own healing and resilience in place to be able to do that. If we don't, we have to take care of ourselves first. I think, because I was in a really abusive relationship years ago, and I honestly think sometimes those relationships are necessary. So a friend of mine has been dating someone who's emotionally volatile and just dealing all kinds of drama that I don't do anymore. Like I don't do that kind of stuff in relationships. And I think sometimes I wonder if this is just probably necessary. All of us need these experiences, because someone can tell you, but I think sometimes you have to experience it yourself to get the lesson. And so I have no regrets about anything any hardship I've gone through, because the lessons have been so wonderful. Without a test, there's no testimony. And honey, testimony, because he's been through a lot. So I think that's just part of life sometimes. Not that like we should ever excuse bad behavior and predatory behavior and accountability. We need to but I think even with the predators, they're hurt. They're hurt people. They're hurt, they're traumatized, they're going through whatever. Some people just get to this place where it's just about power. So I think we need to be clear. Some people are hurting people, and some people are just power hungry, wanting to exert power. And I think one thing I want to say about the taking down monsters and predators, Abigail Disney, in a speech she gave, said that it's not enough. She's talking about women coming into power. It's not enough to come into the same rooms with the same power structure and just replicate those with different people in positions of power. We have to change the rooms. We have to change the nature of power and how power works. That is what a real revolution is. It's not just replacing sort of more marginalized people or women or trans people or people of color in the same sort of positions of power and the same structures of power without changing the nature of how the power functions. So that is actually the real revolution when we think about structural change. And we don't have the stomach for that in this country right now, it seems.
Hopefully any day now, hopefully during this time of quarantine and isolation, we as a species are having an opportunity to dive into a level of self-introspection that we may not have allowed ourselves the time or space for prior to all of this going down. And as much as we can recognize drawing boundaries for ourselves and learning how to deal with emotionally abusive or predatory behavior on a micro level in our personal lives, how have you learned to deal with it on a macro level when it comes to social media? This is something that I've been thinking a lot about over the past couple of months, really, as I have a new series coming out in the next month, and just knowing, being in this industry for over 10 years now, that when you have the courage to step out and put yourself in a vulnerable position of hosting a show or acting on a show or writing a book or hosting a podcast, whatever it is, there's going to be immense love, but there's also going to be some really toxic negative hate. How have you learned to deal with that, to navigate around that, or Have you found any coping mechanisms?
Yes, I have. One thing that comes to mind is something. I'm a Brene Brown scholar, if you will. One of the great things Brene Brown says about that is if you are anonymous and on the internet making comments, she's like, if you're not in the arena, like getting your ass kicked, she doesn't want to hear from you. And I love that. But for me, there's another piece of it, because I think with the nature of what I do, not just as an actress, but as someone who is involved in justice struggles of different kinds for people of color, for trans folks and women, that I have to be in a space of accountability too. So like I have to be able to discern what useful feedback I might get. Like I think that like for me, I think there's an accountability thing that for me, it's really important to be accountable on a political level in terms of like what I do. And so I sometimes I need to read comments, and I need to see if what I think I'm putting out is what is actually being received, or if there's a blind spot that I might have on an issue that I didn't see because it's a blind spot and someone else is pointing that out, and I need to like correct what I've done or what I've said. So I think feedback in terms of accountability, I think is actually really important. I think when people are just being mean or misrepresenting, I've certainly had experiences where people have misrepresented what my intentions were with a malicious intent, right? So sometimes it's about what the intent of the person is. Is the person just trying to be mean? And sometimes it's hard to discern that on the internet, but is the person trying to be mean and just take you down? Or is it coming from a place of love and concern about a bigger issue, or you representing yourself as clearly as possible? So it's a tricky thing, but I think the biggest piece is that sometimes I'm a highly sensitive person. And so I'll see a negative comment sometimes and it'll affect me for a while. We're actors. We're super sensitive people. So it'll affect me for days or weeks and it'll be in the back of my mind. And so sometimes I have to reality check it. I had, because if we read the comment, it's going to come in. I did an exercise last week where like I realized after that I had all these negative thoughts that basically were internalized voices of bullies / internet bullies / bullies from when I was a kid. And I needed to just my acting teacher, one of my acting teachers, Brad Calcaterra back in New York, he had me do this exercise where he would have me take on, it was an improvisation exercise where I would take on the bitchiest drag queen from RuPaul's Drag Race. And I would basically take all the negative things that I say about myself and I would read myself in front of the class with all those negative thoughts, but like committing to it and just reading myself. And so it's a way to externalize all the negative stuff you say about yourself, that I say about myself. And Dr. Joe would say, you have to become aware of what the thought patterns are, right? Because a thought can shift our nervous systems into like just a thought. And so the externalizing, I remember the first time I did the exercise, I committed, because that's what I do as an actor. Committed fully to the exercise. And after Brad said, cut, I fell down into tears because it was so deep to have a room full of people see how mean I was being to myself, how the messages I was saying to myself subconsciously on a daily basis were just so vicious. I can be way more vicious to myself than any internet commenter. And so getting that, but the great thing about the exercise is that it gets it out of the body, because you have to get it out of the body. That's how you begin to create new neurotransmitters. And so I think having ways to like acknowledge that a comment has gotten in and that it might affect us, but then how do we get it out? And then sometimes writing it all down. It's like 2 weeks ago, I realized I was in a lot of negative thinking, so I just wrote it all down. I was like, let me reality check these negative messages. Is this true? Is this true? And one of the things my therapist says to me, is it useful? Is this thought useful? And most of them were not useful. Most of them were not serving me to get any new place. I'm like, why am I holding on to this? Because it's a habit, because it's a program, right? We can become addicted to shame. We can become addicted to these negative things. And so letting go of the addiction to that, it's like, but we have to become aware of it, let it out, and then let it go. So these are some of the ways that I deal with. And then also sometimes like I have people who say really mean things to me. And sometimes about my dancing lately, people have been very critical of my dancing. It's so funny because some people love my dance videos on the line. And some people are like, you can't dance, you're stiff, please stop, make it stop. And I see this stuff and it affects me. I actually have a degree in dance too. So it's also like, whoa. I had scholarships to ballet schools all over the country as a kid. That was a long time ago. And those certainly things I can't do anymore. So that affects me negatively. And there was one commenter who was like, they were really nice. Their teachers were like, I love you and you have good technique, but just consider when you do a pirouette that you turn in the direction of the leg that's in the air. And I was like, well, thank you so much. But that would be a pirouette en dehors or an outside turn. I'm doing a pirouette en dedans or inside turn. So they're both valid. In this choreography, I chose to do an inside turn, but I can also do an outside turn and spot and land, stick the landing. So it was one of those things where they were well-intentioned, but not with all the right information about what was going on. So, but I said there's nothing but love there. And for me, the most important thing is that I am always putting out love. That when people come at me with whatever they're coming at me with, then I'm putting out love. If you want to be hateful and mean and whatever, that's on you. That is your karmic energy. That is what you're doing with your universe and your power. That's on you. That's nothing to do with me. I need not react. I need not take on the things that you were saying about me. If I have a tendency to want to do that, I have to do a lot of work and a lot of self-reflection about that, but I need not take on your stuff. And I think that is the piece. It's there's the accountability thing. Yes, if it's coming from a good place and there's a good point there, yes. But then if it's just mean-spirited and someone wanting to because just say mean stuff because they just have a problem with me being trans and in the public eye. There's a lot of people out there just like that. They have a problem with me existing as a trans person. That exists, unfortunately. And I have to okay, these people just have a problem with me existing as a trans person. That's fine. They have that problem, but that's their problem. That need not affect how I see myself, how I move and operate in the world. And I'm here for something bigger than that. And the brilliant thing about me as a child is when I was bullied ferociously and vigorously by kids, chased home from school, beaten up. It was bad. It was really bad. But I always said to myself, I am here. As a kid, I'm here for something bigger than what these bullies are talking about. I am here for something bigger than that. I knew there was something in here that knew that I was here for something bigger than that. And I think that ultimately has to be where I land. And I don't know if this is just for someone else. I have to land that it is bigger than someone's negative comment. There's accountability, yes, but there's a higher reason. And so I cannot let myself be taken out of the game. I'm here for something bigger than that. And so that was a long answer, and I give long answers, but I hope it was thorough.
Amazing. So many lessons in that. And may I say, as somebody who is a huge fan of your dancing videos, why I'm so drawn to them is because you are so joyous. It's just so clear to see. I can feel the love emanating from you when you post these videos. I remember the quote that you are referring to from Brene Brown. I think it's actually a Theodore Roosevelt quote talking about if you aren't willing to get into the arena yourself and get bloody and bruised and battered, that then your opinion really doesn't matter to me. It's not.
It's a take on that. So she basically, and Daring Greatly is taken from the Theodore Roosevelt quote, and the paraphrase of the quote is, "It's not the critic who matters, the person who stands outside and points and makes fun of the person who's in the arena. It is the person who's in the arena who's scarred and marred, and even if they fail in the failure, they dared greatly." And that is where the title of her book comes from. And so from that, she talks about it. She says, then if you are not in the arena getting marred, getting your ass kicked, then I don't want to hear from you. And then so that's where she landed with that, which I think is just so brilliant. Her work is just I love her work so much. It's changed my life.
I love her so much as well. Do you listen to her podcast called Unlocking Us?
I'm behind. I started late, so I'm not listening weekly. So I've listened to the first 3 or 4. Obsessed. I've met her a few times, which is amazing because I quote her. I did a college lecture, and I literally always refer to her work on shame. Obviously, I'm referring to her today constantly. So, I'm obsessed with.
Yeah, her perspective. Dr. Brown. Her perspective on vulnerability is like none I've ever heard before, and it resonates with me on such a deep level, because I too am a highly sensitive person. And as you mentioned, actors, we are all very sensitive people. But I think that's something that I hope that we as a species will start to understand that words matter and that you aren't just blindly throwing these insults or comments out into the ether of the internet and thinking that they're not going to land on somewhere, because they land somewhere. And more often than not, we do see them, and it does hurt. And I guess I'm just so empathetic as a person that I would never, ever want to make someone else feel a way that I would never want to feel myself. And I think that so often we in the entertainment industry are just viewed as fair game. We're out there in the world. And I have had to learn to implement some self-protective mechanisms, one coming from a therapist as well. It was something that Byron Katie uses. She has a system called The Work. So it's it's a series of 4 questions you ask yourself when faced with a hurtful thought or a negative or damaging thought. So say the thought is, I read online that someone says to me, you're a piece of shit and the worst person on earth. Okay, so I read that and it hurts because it triggers a lot of stuff from childhood and people, bullying me viciously as well. And then not only that, but the negative beliefs that I've chosen to believe about myself over the years. So it triggers me. So I look at that thought and I ask myself a series of 4 questions. Is it true? Well, yes, it's true. I'm a piece of shit and I'm the worst person on earth because they said so and it's ringing true. So yes, it's true. Can I absolutely know that it's true? Well, no, I guess I can't absolutely know that that's true because when I look at other people around me, I know that I am more loving and kind than other people. So maybe it doesn't ring as true as I thought it was. How does that thought make me feel? Awful, worthless, unworthy of being loved, talentless, no reason to put myself out into the world and try to create something loving because what's the point? I'm a big piece of shit and nobody's going to like it anyway. Who am I without that thought? I am a loving, caring person who's coming from a place of compassion and empathy, trying to bring a little bit of light into the world and lift people up in ways that I only wished that I could have had the opportunity to be lifted up while growing up through my formative years. Those 4 questions have been tremendously helpful to me.
Who is this doctor who came up with this? I love it.
Byron Katie, her name is. And
I feel like my therapist may have mentioned Byron.
You've heard of her, and she has some incredible podcasts out there. I think I first came across her work with Oprah on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, and she's also done a really great podcast with Russell Simmons called Under the Skin. So definitely recommended. But so let's talk about your upbringing. So you were raised in the American South in Alabama.
I love the American South. You're Canadian, but the American South. Yes, I am from Mobile, Alabama. Oh my God, what do you want to know? I feel like
everything. I mean, who were you as a kid? Were you close with your family? Who were your best friends?
I didn't have friends as a kid. Like I didn't have friends. I had one friend in middle school who sort of betrayed me. And then I had friends in high school, like really my junior in high school when I could say I had real friends. So I was a kid who, a single mom, were very working class. My mom eventually became a teacher, so education was really important. I loved I can't know if I liked school, but I loved achieving. I loved making all A's. I was public speaking champion in 8th grade, so I was always sort of getting up and making speeches in church and in school. I started studying dance when I was in 3rd grade, so I did talent shows all over Mobile. And then I was a member of a youth organization and there were talent shows all over the Southeast. So I would travel and do these talent shows, doing dance numbers I would choreograph myself. And I had this really active imagination. So on one hand, I was this kid who was very bullied and sort of ridiculed because I was very feminine and I was assigned male at birth and I'm obviously transgender. So there was that. But then I was also this kid who was an overachiever, who was really smart and articulate and could dance.
Where do you think that you found the agency within yourself to continue to pursue your passions as a dancer and performing in talent shows and public speaking at your church and in school while simultaneously being bullied? Because I feel like that's where I came to a crossroads that I didn't know how to navigate during my youth. At around 12 years old, I just gave all those things up because I figured that it was me putting myself in a position where I was a target, and maybe, fingers crossed, if I stopped dancing and doing gymnastics and singing and all of these things, I won't be a target and I won't be bullied. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. I was still viciously bullied.
That breaks my heart. And when I think about, I'm so emotional today. That breaks my heart. I would have killed myself. I mean, I think that the truth is, it's the only thing that got me through my childhood. Is that I had another talent show to do, that I wanted to audition for the Alabama School of Fine Arts and go and do that, and that I had talent, and I had dreams, and they were creative. It was the only thing that kept me alive. Honestly, it's the only thing that kept me alive.
What was the vision that you held for yourself at that age? Did you aspire to be the person that you've become today? Did you?
Yeah. I don't know if I knew I could be, I really knew I could be a woman. That was the wildest dream that I had. I was like, oh my God, I want to grow up and like be Darcel from Solid Gold. Or Iman or something. The dream was I was going to move to New York. Basically, because I was obsessed. I'm 47 years old. I'm about to be 48. It's Fame, the TV show, was like my whole, that kind of Fame and Solid Gold were like my shows, in terms of just sparking my love for dance. And like, okay, I know there's a Fame school in New York City, but then there's an Alabama School of Fine Arts in my home state. That was in Birmingham. So I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to dance in a dance company, maybe dance on Broadway, and then I'm going to transition to acting. That was like that was the dream. I want to be on TV. I want to be a star. Like I wanted to be I knew I wanted to transition to acting. I knew I wanted to dance, but I wanted to be a star. Like I wanted to fucking be a star. And and later on I was like, I want to take acting seriously, because I think being a star and being a really good actor are two different things. And so I take the craft of what I do seriously, but the kid wanted to be a star. I think I imagined that like once I was a star, I would show all the bullies, and they would be like, I'd be like, fuck you to all them. And then I would like get to do what I loved. I get to perform. I get to like use it was really about my imagination. It was about like kind of being beautiful and glamorous, but it was about being free. Dancing was about being free. Being an artist was about being free and just being and delving into these different characters and these different experiences. That was the dream for me as a kid. And lo and behold, here I am.
Lo and behold, you manifested the hell out of it, girl.
It took a long time, though. My breakout moment didn't happen until Orange is the New Black, which happened in 2012, 8 years ago, when I was 40 years old. So it took 40 years.
What point of reference did you have for becoming the human being that you are today? Who did you have that you looked to for inspiration? Or had there been anybody that you could use as a point of reference?
Not who looked like me. I don't know who had similar experiences. I looked to a lot of different people for inspiration, though. My go-tos as a kid, someone asked me this recently. I think about as a kid, I was obsessed with, particularly the 80s. I think the 80s was so formative for me. I was obsessed with Boy George and Culture Club. I was obsessed with Fame, Solid Gold. I was obsessed with Madonna. I remember, oh God, this is emotional for me too. I was also obsessed with pictures. In the 80s, it wasn't until later in the 80s, but early 80s, my mom had given me this Black History book. There was a photo of Leontine Price in this turban. I was obsessed with that photo of Leontine Price. And I remember there were photos of beautiful women that I was obsessed with. And I remember, and my brother confirms, having a twin brother, it's like, am I remembering this correctly? Am I crazy? Because I had memories of going to bed with this Black History book and looking at pictures of Leontine Price. And I also have memories of going to bed with a Jet magazine that because my mom subscribed to Ebony, Jet, and Essence magazine. And there was a Jet magazine that came in that had this beautiful Black woman on the cover. And I get so emotional about this, and I'll tell you why. This beautiful Black woman, she looked like a queen, And I remember taking the Jet magazine, and I remember sleeping with it, and I was in bed with this Jet magazine, this beautiful Black woman on the cover. And I found out years later the woman was Iman. I didn't know who Iman was or anything. And, I think so. I would have probably been like 10 or 11 years old, when this Jet magazine came out. And I met Iman last year at opening night at the Metropolitan Opera. And I didn't connect this magazine to Iman until I started doing so I met her at the opera. She gave me a big hug. She knew who I was. And it was so weird. I just started crying when she gave me a hug and she knew who I was. I was so overwhelmed with maybe I was overwhelmed from the opera, and it was sort of embarrassing, but I'm standing meeting Iman in tears, just that this woman knew who I was and hugged me, and she's Iman. And then she asked me to introduce her. She was getting an award later that year. I think it was in October or something. And she asked me to introduce her, and I had to change my whole schedule around so I could be in New York. And I literally was like, Paul, I lost my manager. It's like, how can we make this happen? So I changed my schedule, and I started doing this research, and I found a picture of the Jet magazine. I was like, and then it just all I was like, oh my God, this is the magazine that I used to go to bed with.
Wow. What other books or pieces of literature were deeply impactful for you during your formative years?
There's the grade school stuff that I read. I remember reading a lot of Langston Hughes poems, and I read a lot of poetry as a kid. So just remember reading just Langston Hughes, and then James Baldwin came a little bit later, in high school. And so in high school is when I really started doing a lot of I just remember reading Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky, and it was just such an intense read. And so I got when I got to the Alabama School of Fine Arts, even though I'd been a straight A student up until that point, I realized that my public school education was not on the same level as all the other kids, because it was an art school, but they also prioritized college prep, and you had to maintain a 3.5 GPA or you'd be kicked out of school. So academics were actually very important there as well. And so I, being the overachiever that I was I am way behind in all of these things. So I went really hard with reading all these all this stuff that I hadn't read, and some were reading Salinger and Fitzgerald and Dostoevsky and Shakespeare. And so when I got to high school, a lot of it, I think back on it, a lot of it was very Western. I remember talking to someone about some of the people. I remember I was talking to Janet Mock, and she was talking about reciting Maya Angelou when she was in high school. And I was reciting Shakespeare. And it was really interesting that my education, I'm older than Janet, but my education was so much about these Western authors and feeling educated because I knew these Western authors, and Maya Angelou and Bell Hooks and all these, and Audre Lorde didn't come till college for me. But I think it was internalized racism, and it was the way the education system was set up in Alabama at the time that I had to be educated. I had to have read, all of these white men, basically.
Yeah. Unfortunately, so many of the authors that you just listed were on the list of banned reading material where I was read. So.
Oh, wow. You had banned reading material in Alberta? Girl.
Yeah, girl. So I wasn't exposed to Maya Angelou because of the content in I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, because she uses the word nigger, and because there's content about childhood rape. I wasn't exposed to J.D. Salinger and Catcher in the Rye because of sexual nature and because of drug use and alcohol. And those are just so minuscule details in the grand scheme of things when it comes to the story of these people's lives and the literary art that they've manifested for the world. So it really was, I was so sheltered in that respect through the majority of my youth, but I took it upon myself in my late teens and early 20s to digest as much of it as I possibly could, because I knew that I was missing an entire side of myself. There was this hole, there was this void that was there, and it could only be filled by the experiences of others, really, because I had no points of reference around me. Nobody looked like me. I was raised in this straight white world where I was the only person of color in my family, in my school, in my town, the only identifiably queer person. So many of the experiences of the people around me, I just couldn't relate to. And so I felt it wasn't until I found the stories of Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Langston Hughes, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, all these people that I felt like I was connecting to a side of myself that I didn't even know existed. It was incredibly powerful. What was your relationship like with your brother, with your identical twin brother growing up? Were you close?
Yeah, we were very close. We still are. We had a fun conversation earlier today. What I think was amazing about my brother and me is that he was also an artist. He painted and drew very realistically from an early age. He was my mother still calls him her genius. He was just so insanely talented. He won every art competition you could win on a local, state, and national level when we were kids. And we were both just immersed in artistic pursuits. And I think getting to share being an artist with him as a kid, and that's still what we share most now as adults, is our love of art, and particularly classical music and opera. He's a singer now, and singer musician now, and I sing opera as a hobby. It's a little hobby. I'm sort of a student of the voice more than I'm a real singer. So my brother and I, it's intense though, because having an identical twin, when you're growing up, people sort of think of you as the twins, as a sort of one person, and that we've always found that very offensive. I have a big personality all by myself, and so does my brother all by himself. So being thought of in relationship to another person was always problematic for us. And I think now my brother does his thing, and he's very much an avant-garde artist, and so we've had very real conversations about my level of visibility now in media and whatnot, and how that may or may not affect him. It's intense thinking about sort of becoming famous and how that affects the people in your life.
Did he go to the Alabama Performing School of Arts as well?
He did. He only went for 2 years, though. He went for 2 years, and then he finished high school back in Mobile, Alabama. And honestly, those 2 years that he wasn't there were really good for me, because I think that like I needed to have that time away from him to really sort of figure out who I was outside my brother. I think he had done a really good job of that, to figure out who he was outside me. But I think I needed that space from him to really figure out me separate from my brother, in a way that he always was very much asserting who he was outside me. I think I needed to be away from him to really fully do that.
And then from that point forward, when he left high school 2 years before you, is that when you continued on your own paths and went your separate ways?
He went to college. He went to the San Francisco Art Institute in San Francisco. And then I went to Indiana University for 2 years. And then I transferred to Marymount Manhattan College. So I had a detour before New York. I got a scholarship at IU Bloomington, and then for whatever reason, I didn't apply to any New York schools. I thought when I graduated from high school that I wanted to be at a ballet company, and the colleges were sort of more of a backup. And then I didn't get into any ballet companies, and no one wanted me, which was hard. The rejection. I mean, I've been dealing with rejection my whole life as an artist. And so I ended up at IU Bloomington for 2 years, and I transferred to Marymount. And that's when the party really started, when I was in New York.
Was New York something that you had aspired to? Was that a vision?
Absolutely. New York was New York or bust. New York was always the place I wanted to live my whole life. I had visited many times before I moved there for college in 1993. New York was everything. And I feel so lucky to have moved to New York in the early 90s too, because the club scene and the energy and the vibrancy in the city at the time was insane and incredible. And just New York in the early 90s was magical. And I think the nightclubs, as debaucherous as many of them were just, they were a cultural experience, and there was just so much creativity there. There was so much freedom. It was just beautiful and special. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like New York was never really on my radar until the first time I went, when I was in my early 20s. There was something about the vibrational frequency of New York City, of the island of Manhattan, that just drew me to it immediately. It was the first time that I had ever felt like I was at home. And I think that so much of it has to do maybe with past life stuff, with just the energetic flow of it that matches with my frequency. But so much of it was the first time that I hadn't been the other, where I could walk the street and I could blend in, where I wasn't the only tall, biracial, queer guy walking around, where I wasn't, I didn't stand out like a sore thumb.
No. Isn't that beautiful? And when were you in New York? When did you in New York for the first time?
Oh gosh, I was there for the first time in probably 2007 or 2008, and I moved in 2010. And I was there for 8 years, actually. I lived there for 6 years, moved here to Los Angeles in 2016, and then held on to my apartment for another 2 years. And you were actually very instrumental in me deciding to let go of my apartment. Do you remember this conversation? You were over at my house for a garden party.
Remind me of it, though, and remind everyone else who wasn't there.
So this was back in 2018. You were at my house for a garden party. We were talking about how you had lived in a co-op, an artist co-op in New York. I remember telling you that I had my apartment for 6 years, that I had for 8 years at that point, that I had rented it out for the past 2 years, and I was going back to New York in a few days to decide whether or not to keep it, to just continue to pay for it myself and have a place to, the pied-à-terre to go back to whenever I want to land back in New York, if I should sublet it, like what I should do. And you had told me your experience, saying that you had kind of been going through the same thing not that long ago. And it was when you went back and first walked into your apartment that you could see it and feel it for the first time, that you had outgrown the space and that it was time to let it go. Yeah. And yeah, I felt the same way. And had it not been for that conversation, I think that I probably would have been looking for reasons to hold on to something, or the fear of letting go of something that I had worked so hard for and what that represented to me, even though it wasn't necessarily serving me anymore. I had evolved past it.
Moving is deeply traumatizing, and it's like you making a home is such an intense thing, and until sort of like up in that is traumatizing. It just is. My therapist defines trauma, and so I'm not being dramatic, as too much, too fast, too soon. And the nervous system can experience good things as well as challenging things as too much, too fast, too soon.
I am having such an aha moment right now. Trauma is too much, too fast, too soon. And especially for highly sensitive people, we can experience a lot of trauma, good and bad. And so much trauma can be stirred up in seemingly positive situations because we haven't dealt with stuff from our past that was too much, too fast, too soon. That's good. I like that. So moving can be hugely traumatic and just what it represents for us living in New York. And I don't know what your experience was, but mine certainly, I wasn't coming from a place of really having an upper hand or a place of abundance when I moved to New York. I hustled, I struggled. I was jumping the subway turnstiles to make it to auditions and living off of raw vegetables from Trader Joe's and hummus and pita for weeks on end. And I struggled.
That sounds like you're like raw vegetables, hummus, and pita. Girl, I was eating ramen noodles because they had ramen noodles for 99 cents at one point. I don't know. I don't eat ramen noodles anymore because I don't actually eat any pasta. But ramen noodles were cheap. You're like, hummus and raw vegetables from Trader Joe's. Girl, I was going to the bodega and getting ramen noodles for 99 cents.
Well, may I preface that with, I was also still working as a model, so I did have to be mindful of what I was putting into my body.
When I was younger, I could eat whatever I wanted. I ate whatever I wanted, and I was this big. I ate badly too. I remember when I was at Houston Ballet Academy that summer of it was the summer I graduated from high school, so that would have been 91. I discovered cookie dough ice cream. So and it was a wrap. That was it. So I ate whatever, and I was also dancing 6 hours a day, classical ballet. So I was fine, but I ate whatever I wanted to for years, and I ate everything. I can't do that anymore.
Once you start nourishing yourself wholly, fully from the inside out, starting with your soul, I feel like it's only inevitable that eventually we move into nourishing our physical selves as well. But in nourishing myself throughout that time, it wasn't just it had so much to do with my mentality and with abundance mentality in New York specifically, because it's a tough city. It's not an easy place to be, especially when you're in your 20s and you're alone and you're struggling and you have this dream and people look at you as though these are just, you have a list of lofty goals, and you really have to have incredible unwavering faith in yourself in order to get through those years in New York. Because not only was it beneficial for me to be in a city where I was no longer the other, the only one, it was challenging because it was the first time in my career where I wasn't the only one, where there were other people around me who looked like me, who were models like me and actors like me and writers and spiritual practitioners and people who embodied all of the things that I thought were special about me for the first time. It really put things in perspective that in order to find true success within myself, it had to start from a really authentic place. And so much of that just started with just solid emotional well-being. And so much of that was attributed to my home, to finding a really...
You were doing that in New York. So how old were you? Because I'm just thinking when I moved to New York, I was not thinking about my emotional well-being or my spirituality. I was also in college. How old were you when you moved to New York? I was girl. I'm this is so advanced.
I was 25 when I moved to New York. However, I'd been living in Vancouver, British Columbia for about 6 years prior to that, which is a very spiritual place. The life blood that runs through the veins of Vancouver, British Columbia is based on spirituality and meditation and yoga and mindfulness and thoughtful driven practices. So that was really ingrained in me from 18, 19 years old onwards. And that was it was hugely important to me too. Struggling with anxiety and eating disorders and depression and many of the things that were not playing the victim, but very much directly attributed to the trauma I had experienced in my youth. I knew that in order to work through some of that trauma and to maintain a sustainable level of overall mental and emotional health, I had to implement those practices into my life. I had to implement yoga, meditation, journaling, mindful practices, and that moved on to therapy and antidepressants at different points in my life. But I had to find the tools that worked for me because I had to find a level of sustainability and balance. But abundance mentality came along with that as well. And I guess I'm curious to know what your experience is like now living in Los Angeles, being a first-time homeowner. How are you navigating all of that? Are you finding that there are still triggers from the past around abundance mentality or lack mentality that you're still dealing with today?
Oh yeah, I think that's so beautiful, Jeffrey, that like you got to this place at 25 thinking about abundance. And like I was so in survival through my 20s. And it was a different time. And so when I moved to New York in 93, I was 21. I was 21. And I was just in survival. I was so in survival for so long. So I think that's beautiful that I didn't get to. I've been in therapy for 20 years. I did start therapy. And the only reason I started therapy 20 years ago is because I transitioned 22 years ago and I was starting with a new doctor and they required therapy. So I've been in therapy for 20 years, but really thinking about abundance and meditation, like that probably started 10 years ago for me. So in some ways I'm late to the game with all of that, but God's time, not my time.
Have you had the same therapist?
Oh, no. I've had different therapists over the 20 years. And it's been good. I've learned different things from different therapists. It's been great. But in terms of abundance versus scarcity now, I'm just so aware that it's a mentality that it is really that you can be that I can be, that I can be in this very privileged position, right? Like I'm being aware of my privilege now, particularly during a global pandemic. I'm just like, wow, like I am in a space of this enormous privilege. I own a home. It's a condo, but I still own a home. And I have I'm in a glam room that I like built. I'm in a glam room, like literally right now I'm in a glam room. So girl, like from not being able to pay my rent and being on Medicaid, I think I definitely have had I remember when I went into escrow for this place that I started having crazy panic attacks. And I would panic, anxiety attacks, really crazy anxiety attacks, and I couldn't I was breathing hard, and I was I went into escrow and started having these insane panic attacks. It was they were going to take me out. It was I felt heart racing. It was really bad. And I was in therapy one week, and we kind of started. And I couldn't breathe, and I was crying. I was a mess. What is going on? And as we started to parse out, I was and my therapist was because I was so completely offline, not in my resilience zone. And what kept coming up, breathe this one in. What kept coming up was being in New York City in line at housing court with the eviction notice that I had gotten. And it was the second in February of, and I've talked about this before publicly, but in February of 2012, I got my second eviction notice in 2 years. And I was working, but the restaurant was slow, and I wasn't booking acting jobs, and so I couldn't pay my rent. And so I had gotten my second eviction notice in 2 years. And I just remember standing in line in the eviction court, going to see if I can, talk to the lawyers of my landlord to not be evicted from my apartment. And I remember standing there crying, just in terror, being homeless. Has always been one of my biggest fears, not having a place to live. Is still my nervous system gets ramped up now thinking of it. It's interesting what the memories do. And then that actually, as we explored that, and then that went to a childhood memory. That when it's hysterical, it's historical. Then that went to a childhood experience that I can't talk about publicly. That was even deeper than that. And so there was so much attached to. So much shame attached to what Brene Brown says about shame is that it's the intense, painful belief that one has about themselves that they're unworthy of connection and belonging. She says that guilt is, I'm sorry I made a mistake, and shame is, I'm sorry I am a mistake. She says shame functions in two different ways. Either I'm not enough in a situation. If we can get past that, shame then drives this other shape. Who do you think you are? And so when I was buying this condo in Los Angeles, the who do you think you are came up big time for me. And the who do you think you are, Laverne? You're just a Black trans woman from Alabama, and you're poor, and you had an eviction notice just a few years ago, and you're going to get this home and this mortgage, and you're going to screw it up because you're just a fuck up. All the tapes just kind of came in, and it was just it was so bad that it overwhelmed my nervous system. And we were able to work through that. I was able to work through that with my therapist, thank God. And now I'm able to Now I'm in a place 2 years, that was 2 years ago. Now I'm in a place where like now I'm at home all the time. And I'm in the closet and I'm in looking at my view and I'm looking at my home that I love and that I've created. And so where I'm at with that now is thinking about that this is the dream realized, that I am literally sitting in the dream realized. Like I'm in my glam room, I'm overlooking at my purse collection. It's lovely. I'm loving my bags. I'm a bag girl. And it's the dream realized. And that once it happens, it is so important to have new dreams. It is so important that it's just, for me, it's been about this quarantine and thinking about Dr. Joe's work and about what he says about creating the future that we want in the present through gratitude for that thing that we don't have yet, that we shell our nerve, that we're grateful for it now and our body feels as if we've experienced it. I'm like, that's what I was doing in Alabama. That's what I was doing in Alabama when I was pretending that I was on a red carpet. I was pretending that I was at an award show or on television. And it was so strong in my body as this child. And that's what I did. And that's what got me through. And it shifted my nervous system to be in that space of my imagination of the life and the future I wanted. And once you get it, and you will if you do the work and, align, then it's like, what now? And so I think so much of where I'm at now with scarcity thinking versus abundance is like feeling like, am I even worthy of all this? And I definitely can. I had a conversation with my brother because when this Corona thing started, I was like, oh my God, I'm so privileged. And I started having so much guilt about it, right? Like, and I was just like, oh my God, this must be what white people feel about white guilt. I'm having like class guilt right now. I'm like, this must be what it feels like. And I called my brother and I was like, I'm having all this guilt. And I was thinking, I've been giving to charities and I've been doing all this stuff. And then I thought I really had, I was like, are the people in my life taken care of, right? Like giving away to charity, is good. But then I was just like, okay, is my brother okay? Is my mom okay? Are the people who clean my apartment? Are they okay? Are all the people like taken care of like in my life, right? And then my brother's like, that again, that's not useful. The guilt around like being privileged is not useful. And privilege is like, you have to be aware of it and then you use your privilege for people who don't have it. That's all you can really do. Privilege, I've worked insanely hard to get where I'm at, but I also understand that I've gotten where I am because of various privileges. There's pretty privilege. There's the privilege of my education, that my mother was a teacher and valued education, and that I speak in a way that makes white people comfortable. Like you being a Black person in America, you have to you don't have to, but one of the privilege is like being able to walk into a space and know how to like not scare white people. That is like a privilege of, maybe not getting killed. You have something to say.
No, definitely. I couldn't agree more. And that's something that I wasn't even aware of until I moved to New York, because it was my norm being around in predominantly white, predominantly straight places. I didn't realize, I didn't know that code switching was a thing until I was put in a position where all of a sudden I was being called out for it and at times praised for it and being given advantages that my other Black brothers and sisters and queer brothers and sisters weren't having the same opportunity to do. It's real.
Mm-hmm. So I'm here because of a lot of privilege. I acknowledge that. I'm also here it's also a miracle that I'm here. There's like a lot of privileges that allowed me to sort of be where I'm at, but then to be a Black trans woman with like, an Emmy sitting in the other room and 2 SAG awards and like magazine covers, like all over there was like my magazine covers all over my apartment. And like, like that is like, it's a miracle. Like that's a miracle. So it's, yes, there's privilege, but then there's so the way that I'm dealing with I take a long time to answer a question, don't I? But the way that I'm dealing with like the abundance versus scarcity now is like, what are the new dreams? What are the new goals? And that I am really trying to be grateful for what I have now, really like lean into it and say, and like be in a space of not feeling guilty because I am privileged and because I'm successful by a certain, capitalist matrix, right? Like, let's like understand how we are framing things, using that privilege for people who don't have it, but then also what is the next thing? And so I think so much of it for me now is like, what is the new dream? What is it? So a lot of the dreams have come true. What is the new one? And like, I've been making a list and writing things down and like practicing the way Dr. Joe says, and it's been really glorious. It's been really wonderful. Living in the space of the dream is the fucking answer. It really is. And I think that is because living in the dream and in the imagination and making those things a reality in our material world, if we do that, it's like really hard to like be worried about like, like bullshit. Like it just really is. To be in this space of the dream, God's dream for us, the universe's dream for us, whoever you believe in, source's dream for us, living in that space is so deeply healing. Like it becomes the placebo. It becomes this thing of like, for me, the abundance is just about what God wants for me. And so I think it's a turning it over. And I've had moments over the past 7 years with understanding the responsibility that my higher power has given me, right? With great privilege comes responsibility. I mean, there's been a lot of responsibility with this, and it's been a heavy responsibility, like being the first trans person to do blah, blah, all that stuff that's in my, bio. And it was heavy. And now I'm feeling the lightness of, and I've asked God and I've asked my higher power for like, I want to connect to what you want from me, but it can't, like, the heaviness of the responsibility is hard. Like it's really, really hard. I need to be able to do this from a light place. I want to be there in your mission for me, but it can't be so heavy. It's just too hard, And so it has to shift for me necessarily because of my nervous system, because of the stress hormones that have been released from that responsibility. It's been very stressful and I can't keep living that way. And so the abundance piece now is about gently every day asking myself, how can I let go of those hormones of stress? How can I live in the space of the dream to reset my nervous system, create new neurotransmitters, new, synapses, in my body so that I can fully live in the space of abundance and from a neurobiological standpoint. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I love your long form answers. You and I are going through something very, very similar in having to set new goals and intentions and visions for ourselves. Because I too, as a kid, I had all of these very specific goals and feelings. I knew that I would work as an actor. I knew I would live in Hollywood. I knew that I would travel the world and walk runways and things like that. And those were visions that I held and images that became so real to me that it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. I had unwavering faith in myself. And then once you get to that point where you achieve all of those things, all of those childhood dreams, I was left in a place of limbo for a couple of years of not really knowing what was going to come next. And now I've just come back to a place of diving deep within myself to look from an outside perspective of what I have achieved and where the next logical paths will branch out, what makes the most sense, but also what is going to fulfill my soul the most. Because some of those dreams that we have as kids of working as an actor, being on set, walking red carpets, as incredible as some of those experiences are, I think that you can't know it until you experience it personally, that not all of them are what they're made out to be, that Hollywood very much is an idea, it's an illusion. And in order to find true success, personal success, it has to come from a really intention-driven, authentic place. So what for you, what job in recent years has been the most soul fulfilling for you?
That what just came up, that was so beautiful. I'm loving this conversation. Thank you. You're so soulful and like amazing. You're amazing. What just came up for me is a purpose-driven life. What is the purpose? And I think my life and my career changed when I began to understand. And I think it happened in 2008, actually, when I did a reality show called I Want to Work for Diddy. My life changed. Stay with me. Stay with me. The day before my final interview for I Want to Work for Diddy, I was walking down the street in New York, and this is part of my daily life. But I was like, misgendered, and people were like, this group of men on the street were like calling me a man and like, screaming and yelling. I mean, what the interesting thing about when like my life pre-fame and living in New York City as a trans woman is that when people would like misgender me, they wouldn't be like, that, I think that's a trans person, or like it would be whispered like, that's a man. They would be screaming it like really, really loudly. And so like everybody within a 5-mile radius could like, that's a man. It was this very sort of vehemently loud thing that would happen to me on a daily basis. And I was used to it. But this particular day, I was kicked. One of the guys kicked me. I kind of got close to them, and I was shopping for a scarf for my final interview. I was in suits and whatever. And I wanted to get a scarf, and one of the guys kicked me, and I was like freaked out. I was like, this man just touched me. And then I went and retreated to a nearby store, called the police. By the time the police got there, the guys had left the scene. But the very next day, I had my final interview for I Want to Work for Diddy. And this is 2008. And I literally thought to myself, if this hip hop mogul, P. Diddy, like has me on his show, what difference could that make for other Black trans women? And from the Black community, this is a group of Black men who had done this. And it was often groups of men of color who were perpetuating this kind of thing. Not always, but often. Marginalized people police each other. This is not to suggest that Black folks are more transphobic than everybody else, but we're often policing each other in marginalized groups. So I went into the I want to work for Diddy situation. That last interview, I ended up being on the show with a sense of purpose that was bigger than me. And that I was like, and then it worked, and it ended up working out, like doing, and none of my friends and confidants, my brother, no one thought I should do a reality show. In 2008, anytime, well, trans people hadn't been on reality shows. I think Alexis Arquette had been on The Surreal Life, and then Claudia Charrier had been on Janice Dickinson's modeling agency. This would have been the first time a trans person was on a competition reality show. And we had been exploited in the media up until then. And so everybody was like, they're going to exploit you. It's going to be horrible. And I said to them, and the producers in the final interview, that I don't want to be exploited on this show. And they said, Diddy doesn't want to do that. Sean Rankin, he was like, my word's a Black man, that's not what we're doing. And they didn't. And it ended up being a really good experience for me. And so the piece of purpose that taught me that even this moment on a reality show, if it was for something bigger than me, it was going to work out, because it wasn't about me, it was about something divine. So the recent project, another long answer, the recent project that I've worked on that has probably stirred my soul the most probably has to be Disclosure. It has to be this documentary that I executive produced that premiered at the Sundance Film Festival earlier this year. Disclosure looks at the history of trans representation on screen and film and on television. And it's really a movie that I've wanted to do for a long time. There's a movie called Ethnic Notions, and there's a movie called Celluloid Closet. Ethnic Notions is directed by Marlon Riggs, the late, great Marlon Riggs, and it looks at how Black people have been represented in cinema, from the beginning of time. And then Celluloid Closet obviously looks at gay and lesbian representation in film. And I was like, we need a trans celluloid closet. I've been saying that for years, and I wanted to do something about trans history, and having that intersect with representation just felt right for me and what I do as a person who works in the media. And I met this director named Sam Fader, just happenstance, 3 years ago. It was summer of 2017. I was missing New York. I was missing the community of trans people I had created in New York. And I went on social media and saw that two friends of mine were speaking at a panel at Outfest. And I was like, it was a Saturday morning. I jump up with no makeup on. I jump out of bed. I was like, I'm going to go. It was just totally random. I never do stuff like this. And I just went with no makeup on, and just it was 11:15 and the panel started at noon. So I jumped up and threw some clothes on and got a lift and went to the panel. I arrived, and my friend Nick Adams from GLAAD says, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. My friend Sam is doing a presentation on a film. It's the Transcellular Closet." And I was like, "Oh, sounds great." And I saw the presentation. I was blown away. He had done all this research. There were films from as early as 1898 that have cross-dressing. There's a movie from 1914 called The Florida Enchantment that actually is probably the first cinematic sex change. Someone takes a pill and then wakes up and becomes a woman, takes the pill and wakes up the next day and becomes a man, and vice versa. And so there's this whole history of trans folks in various incarnations being represented on screen. Met with Sam, and I'm EPing this film. We premiered at Sundance. Literally, just such a labor of love. And Sam is my director is so passionate and so ethical. I've been so blessed to work with incredible people. He had this idea for a fellowship program. He was like, we should have an all trans cast. And in a case when we, all trans crew. So everyone who speaks, who we interview on camera, is transgender. There's no one in our film who we interview who is not trans. And everyone who was also on camera was paid as well, which is unusual for a documentary.
Yes.
But the entire crew, he wanted to have also be trans. So the people who are making it are trans. And he said, in the case where we can't find a trans person to fill a role, we'll have a cis person train a trans person. So he got this idea for this fellowship program, and we got all these amazing applications from trans people. So we had these trans fellows that we call them, who were on set learning from cis people in various roles in hairstyling and different, crew positions. And it's something I want to try to implement in some of my other things that I produce. And so the way that the film was made and Sam's vision is I love our movie so much. And it feels so we're at this interesting time with trans representation where there's this unprecedented, numbers of trans people on television now, everything that's Pose and everything that's happened. Janet Mock has a deal at Netflix. And so we need to be able to critically reflect on this moment and how we got here. And this is like a perfect film, I think, for this moment. And I'm just so proud of it. I'm so proud of the brilliance of all the trans folks that we interviewed and the stories that they tell us about their interactions with all these images, films that we know, like Silence of the Lambs and Boys Don't Cry, and shows like, All in the Family and the Jeffersons, and then some things we don't know. It's just so, I fucking love our movie so much. I'm so excited.
I'm so proud of you, Laverne. That is, I can feel the joy emanating from you while talking about this. I'm so excited. I heard a lot of great things about Disclosure. I think I remember seeing my friend Jen Richards tweeting about it at Sundance, saying that it was one of the most important films that she had seen that season at Sundance.
Jen Richards is in our film, and Jen Richards is, Jen Richards is brilliant. So, you're friends with Jen, she's brilliant. But she's so brilliant in our film. She's so brilliant.
Oh, she is. They don't call her smartass Jen for nothing. She
calls herself that. I think she started calling herself that. But she is. She's brilliant.
It is a self-fulfilling prophecy, honey. She wears it. So this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was your second film at Sundance this past year, correct?
Third.
Oh, bitch, your third, honey.
The only one is as an executive producer, and then I was in two other films as an actor. One is called Promising Young Woman, which was supposed to come out in April, but obviously with Corona, they've delayed the release of it. Emerald Fennell, who's the director, she is it's such a brilliant film. Oh God, I love that movie so much. I can't wait for people to see it. The trailer is sickening. If people haven't seen this trailer for Promising Young Women, they need to see it. I think it's a really interesting take on our post-Me Too world. And the other film is Bad Hair, directed by Justin Simeon.
Yes, honey, with my girl, Kelly Rowland.
Do you know Kelly?
Kelly and I did a movie together a couple of years ago called Love by the 10th Date. And it was actually a Lifetime movie that is one of my favorite Black films in cinematic history. It's so fucking good. It was myself, Kelly Rowland, Carrie Hilson, Megan Good, Calais Stewart. It was just like this
cast is sickening work.
Badass cast. I think it's really truly only available on iTunes to buy or rent, but it's called Love by the 10th Date, and it's so fucking good. It's incredible. It was one of my favorite roles to play because one, I think it was only my second time ever being directed by a Black female director. Nzinga Stewart is her name, and she's
Nzinga. Just I love her. I love her so much. I literally, okay, I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast. I'm working on a project, and she's on a list. I'm like, of directors I want to work with again. Isn't she just amazing? I love her.
She's brilliant. I love that you love her as much as I do. She wrote and directed Love by the 10th Date. She's so fantastic. She had directed me on an episode of Unreal in the second season. And she's just so magical. What did you work with her on?
We just worked together on Inventing Anna, a Netflix show that I'm doing that is shut down now with Shonda Rhimes. It's Shonda Rhimes' first show for Netflix. And she directed a really important episode for my character on, and we have a few more days to work with her. I am obsessed with her. I think she's so great for actors. There's not a lot of great directors for actors on TV. And she's such consideration for the camera and for the crew. And she's always has such great energy. I love her. I want to work with her again. I have to watch this movie now because it's Nzinga's movie. I'm obsessed.
Yes, I know. I think she was working on a sequel for it as well, which fingers crossed, and maybe you could jump on board with us because it's so fucking good. I can't wait for you to see it, Laverne.
I love her so much. I adore her. Aw, small world. Yeah. And Kelly is such a sweetheart. It's so weird. Destiny's Child is also like, so it's like, you know what I mean? Like to go, I grew up on Destiny's Child. Obviously I was older. When I say grow up, I feel like No 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 came out either the year I started transitioning or like the year before. And so through my all my early transition was all about like the Destiny's Child looks, particularly Beyonce, but like Kelly and Michelle. And it was like, that was my whole No, I mean, the writings on the wall, it was just so iconic. So I love that. And I met Kelly before we worked together, but just getting to work with her and like, and I was appropriately, I didn't fangirl out too much. I was like, I was,
Something that I was so immediately struck by with Kelly Rowland, and something that I had to tell her this after the first couple of weeks of working together, that she was one of the first people that I had met in the entertainment industry who was at the level that she was at with film and fashion, music and dance. I truly believe in my heart of hearts that she would be the exact same person even if she wasn't living the life that she was living. She is so kind and generous of herself. She's so grounded and present and loving and empathetic and compassionate and just truly just such a beautiful, beautiful human being. I have such...
That's exactly right. Wow, that's beautifully said. That's exactly right. That's exactly the sense. Yeah. Ooh, that's deep. That's a question I asked myself. Would I be the same person? That's that's deep.
Do you think that you would be?
Well, what I know for sure, I think all these circumstances have certainly changed me. But what I know for sure is that the people who know me say I'm still the same person. So it's hard for me to have perspective on myself like that. I feel like a lot of these circumstances have changed the way I have to live, right? Like being recognized on the street, like I have to live differently. I can't just like go to the Walgreens and
Definitely. I think that is one of the, after being in this industry for over 10 years now, I think that is one of the greatest compliments that you could be paid. I've been paid the same compliment from my friends and family that I'm the same person that they knew. Obviously, I've evolved, I've changed, I've grown, I've matured, I've become wiser in ways, I've become more protected and guarded in ways, but at my soul's core, I'm the same person. And I know this to be true for myself, that it's a huge blessing and the greatest compliment, because unfortunately, after living in Los Angeles for the past couple of years, I've lost several people around me to the fame monster. They are no longer the same person. And, they may be finding capitalistic, commercial success, monetary success, social media success, but when the price of that is your soul, in a way, it's hard for me to see it as successful.
It's really interesting moving here and thinking like, I moved here 4 years ago and I was, arguably already a star.
Yes, honey.
And so moving here, like, already a star. It's interesting. I mean, I'm so glad that like I cut my teeth in New York and then I like trained in New York and then like first few years of my like breakout moments happened in a place like New York, because I love living in LA now, but I love New Yorkers. I love the people in New York are, I think, some of the best people in the world. Can't tell me anything else. I love New Yorkers. And so that energy in LA has been really challenging for me. And like, I think like I've struggled with the shoulds that like, Laverne, you are, on magazine covers and you should be doing this and you should be hanging out with these people and should be doing all these things. And like, I've had to really let go of that. I went through a little bit of that in the beginning of moving here. And I've had to let go of the shoulds around my levels of success and fame. And I should be doing this and hanging out with these people. And like, because I've never been a social climber. That's never been like my thing. I work. I'm a worker. Like I'll go and like, just, I work. Like that's what I know. Like that's what I saw my mother do for like 40, 50 years, is just work hard. All of this other stuff. And I think hanging out with people just because they're famous or for a photo op or something, like that just doesn't feel authentic to me. It just doesn't feel right. And like, I think one of the brilliant things about my life is me being trans, in that I think there's so many people who either they're transphobic or like a lot of men, right, who date in our industry, who date trans women secretly, but like, because I'm like really well known, like they would never approach me, right? Like because it's just like they wouldn't want that to get out. So there's a lot of men that I know in this industry who are secretly have sex with trans women, right? But they wouldn't want anyone to know about it. I know about those men. None of them approach me, right? And I think, and then even the casting couch stuff, I think about that, and I think about there was a project that I was sort of attached to years ago. This is before Orange is the New Black, and there were other trans women involved who got sexually harassed by one of the producers, and I was like, that didn't happen to me. But then my manager Paul was with me at the meetings, right? So like I've been really the transness in so many ways has shielded me from a lot of stuff that like other people in this business have experienced so far, you know, and
Yeah.
I've had a challenging enough life for sure. But like, I'm just so, I don't know, I'm just really grateful that even like, sometimes I feel like I'm not, you know, leveling up socially the way I should be, but none of that. I don't know if that doesn't feel like God's plan and purpose for me. When I think about when I meditate, you know, in the morning, I'm like, I'm not leveling up socially and I'm not like hanging out with the right people and I should be, you know, schmoozing. And I'm like,
yeah, I feel like the base level question that it comes down to for me is, does it feel good? When I'm with you, does it feel good? Do you make me feel good about myself? Do I make you feel good about yourself? Are you putting out kindness and love into the world? Are you operating from a place of authenticity and a heart-driven place? Who are you at your soul's core? And does that vibe with who I am? And once you drop all of the bullshit and the people in your life who aren't vibrating on the same frequency as you, it just creates space for the people who are in alignment with who you are and who your soul's purpose is striving to be. Those are the people who take that place.
and that's a beautiful thing.
I found some great people in LA. Actually, the one example I have of like an quote unquote industry environment or party that is so no bullshit, totally authentic. Are you familiar with Tracy Toms?
I am. I love Tracy.
Oh, I love Tracy so much. And she has a couple of parties a year at her house that are...
Heard about them. I have not made it there yet.
Oh, you have to come. I'll let you know the next time. Trace LaSalle is very often there as well.
Yeah, Tracy's told me about them. I love Tracy. She's an amazing being. Yeah.
Phenomenal woman. Yeah, definitely. But we'll let you know the next time that she has a party, because it's genuinely just the best of the best humans.
We've had some lovely moments over the years. She's an amazing human being. She's just real, you know?
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, girl. Yeah, just being real. Absolutely. These are two questions that a friend of mine, Aubrey, started asking me years ago on my birthday, and now they're my standard birthday questions for my friends and family. And since you have a birthday coming up, I'm going to ask you, what is the greatest lesson you learned this past year, and what intention do you want to bring into this next chapter of your life?
So funny, because I feel like so many of the lessons I keep learning over and over again. But I started this year after I went on vacation in December, and I said, I need to start living differently. I realized how stressed out I've been at the end of last year. And I can't keep living it from the hormones of stress, the way Dr. Joe talks about that. I have to like really slow myself down. I have to do less. I have to prioritize my physical health, but also my psychological and emotional health, like really prioritize it. And that necessarily means I'm going to have to do less. And so I can have time to be quiet and I can have time to reflect. This global pandemic interestingly enough, has been a really great opportunity for that. I didn't see it that way in the beginning, and I had panic attacks, but I've gotten to a place where I really understand that this is an opportunity for me to really reset in the way that I intended to at the beginning of this year and start really and truly living differently. So the intention for this next phase of my life, the next year, is to be true to that, is to really, I think the piece is to really change how I am with myself every day so that I'm really more fully in the space of the dream on a daily basis. And I'm going to be bumped in and out, right? Because that's life and stressful things will come up. But everything I'm doing is towards the reason that I'm here on this planet. Not that I'm not always already doing that, but like even I think it's about my relationship with myself. It's like that is the thing that I think I've gotten really good at going out in the world and showing up and doing stuff like this and showing up on set prepared. And there's a lot, I've gotten good at my job. I think I've gotten good at interpersonal relationships or whatever to an extent. I could probably get better at that. I don't reach out enough. But my relationship with myself needs to really, I need to be kinder to myself on every single level. And so that is the intention. And that like, I have to let bullshit melt away. Bullshit of what I think should be happening. I think, being single now and like I've never really been that girl. There's a part of me that will do things for a man, right? Like not big parts. not anything that would really compromise like who I am at my core, like not anymore. In Laverne in my 20s and 30s, yeah, but not Laverne now. But even beyond that there are, there's a decision that I've made recently that I can't talk about that is going to be life-changing for me. And that decision has to be for my overall health and well-being and spiritual development. And that it may adversely affect my romantic life and my desirability to men. And so few men have shown up for me in a way that like is worth it anyway. A few have, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think I'm so grateful for the few men in my past who have shown up for me in a beautiful way, like romantic partners. And I can count them on less than one hand. To quote Mariah Carey about something different. You know that Mariah Carey quote? Mariah Carey says, "I've only had sex with a few men and I can count them on less than one hand." That's not me. I've had sex with more than but in terms of men who've shown up for me in my life, I can count them on in a substantial way. Romantic partners, less than one hand. And I'm grateful for those men. So I think, yeah, it's about my relationship with myself and being kinder to myself, being more gentle with myself. I mean, when I'm alone, I think being alone so much during this pandemic is really like, what is my real relationship with myself? What is it?
That's good. I love that. What is your spiritual practice?
Complicated. This is part of it. I'm really trying to practice my spirituality, like when I come out and when I in all of my affairs, as they say in one. To practice these principles in all my affairs. There's some of those tenets. It's meditation. I started practicing transcendental meditation about a year and a half ago, and that has become a part of my spiritual practice.
Did you do like the full meal deal proper training in TM?
Yeah, I went to the TM Institute in Los Feliz. They have a great center in Los Feliz, Los Angeles. My ex-boyfriend, he had gone there, and so I went to his teacher. She's no longer there, Erin. She moved away, I think, to Idaho or something. But I went and did the class. But they do private. They're group classes that you can go to. You get your mantra or whatever, or they can do private. So I did a private with her, and it's like a 3 or 4 days course that you have to do consecutively. And that was the trick, finding 4 consecutive days where I could go with my schedule. But yeah, so TM has been wonderful. I'm incorporating a lot of Dr. Joe's meditations as well into my practice. So I'm doing like my TM stuff, but then I'm incorporating some Dr. Joe stuff and like a lot of the stuff he talks about around practicing or rehearsing the life that you want. That's new for me. My spiritual practice also is revolved around the community resiliency model. It's a therapeutic model, but I find it's very spiritual, particularly the resourcing part of it. So the community resiliency model is therapeutic practice that's about resetting the nervous system. A lot of the things that we talked about here today, and it's based on 6 simple tools that anyone can use. That they're based in tracking. Tracking is about figuring out what's going on in your body, resourcing, using things that are sort of positive in your life and turning the volume up on those things is how I would talk about it. Gesturing, help now, tracking, resourcing, gesturing, help now, grounding, and I always forget the 6, shift and stay. I remembered all 6. I don't always remember all 6. Shift and stay. Shift and stay is amazing because shift and stay is about, somatic work is all about what's going on in your body. So like I have a therapy session actually in a few hours on via Zoom. And my therapist will be like, I'm feeling anxious today, for example. Where do you feel that most in your body? Invariably, it's always like in my gut, or sometimes it comes up through here, but it's through here. In my gut, usually I'm feeling anxious there. And she's like, is there somewhere in your body where it's neutral or positive? She'll ask me. And then and sometimes, often it's my ankle, sometimes it's my wrist. And then she'll invite me to focus my energy and my attention on that place that's neutral and positive in my body. And just focus there and sense my energy there. Then after we'll talk a little bit more. And after a while, invariably, she'll ask me, how's the anxiety? And then almost always the anxiety, the volume has been turned down a little bit. And the thing about shift and stay is that it's not about like the anxiety going away completely. It's about what else is true. It's about both and. It's not an either or kind of proposition. It's about the both and. So yes, there's a little bit of anxiety, but there's also pleasant feelings in my body. And so for me in my life, even though there might be some challenging things going on, it's become a spiritual practice to me. When something is challenging, I'm like, yeah, this is challenging. This is hard. This hurts. But what else is true? And what else can I be grateful for in this moment as well? And can I have this thing that's hard? Yes. But then can I turn the volume up on this other thing that feels good and that's amazing, that's awesome? And once you start turning that volume up on that can become a resource, right? And there's resourcing, and there's tapping and all kinds of things that are part of EDMR that we're starting to gently incorporate into that practice. So the therapeutic things that I'm doing feels like a spiritual practice to me, because all of this work to reset my nervous system is allowing me to connect more fully with source, with my higher power, and with my reason for being here. And so the therapeutic practice for me is very much tied to my spirituality.
I mean, I couldn't have said it any better myself. I feel like so much of me dealing with my anxiety, depression, eating disorders through my teens and 20s, the main intention in healing all of that was so that I was a clearer channel to be able to connect to source within me as well.
And finding ways to be of service in a way that's not depleting, right? Can't pour from an empty cup. And so making sure that my cup is full and that the overflow is for everyone else, as Jan Van Zet would say. So that like being of service too is a part of spiritual practice, but doing it in a way that like it's not depleting. And right now, what's deep for me now is that as we're all in a global pandemic and I want to be of service, is that like I'm going through my own stuff with this. I'm going through a lot with it. It's been very challenging. It really has been. I'm in this spiritual place with it all, but it's been hard being this isolated. I live alone. I don't have a partner. I don't have a roommate. I live in a condo. So like when I go down the hall to the trash chute, I have to put gloves and a mask on. When I go to the roof to run around, I've been running around the rooftop. I'm in a mask. I don't have a yard to go into. Like it's challenging. It's been very, very challenging. But the gift is the spiritual piece. If you don't get to a spiritual place after this, I don't know what to say. I'm just like, girl.
This is the opportunity for us as a species to dive deeper within ourselves. I actually have one of my favorite meditation teachers, gurus coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, Sarah Blondin. She has this incredible podcast called The Live Awake Project that are all just her journey.
That is a great title, The Live Awake Project. What's her name? Sarah Blondin?
Sarah Blondin, yes. So she started this project from going through a deep depression and bout of anxiety and needed to find a way to soothe herself. So she started writing to herself in her journal in a way that she needed. She was telling herself the words that she needed someone else to tell her. So she took these journals and recorded them and made it into a meditative podcast. And I cry during every episode because in her talking to herself to soothe herself, she's instantly connecting to the collective consciousness in a way that makes it sound like she's speaking to me, in a way that she's speaking to you. It's so beautiful, Laverne. I'll send it to you.
That is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, it's gorgeous. I'll send you the link. You'll love it. It's fantastic.
Oh.
Fantastic. When was the last time you cried?
This morning.
Oh, yeah. When do you feel most authentically yourself?
It's a hard question. I don't know. I feel very authentically myself right now. I think like it's when I'm in relationship to energy that allows me to bring all of myself. So that relationship can come here with you or from another person. That relationship can come if I'm writing or working on a project. That energy can come. It's when I can connect with energy that allows me to bring all of myself is when I feel most authentic. And I had moments with Sam Bader, my director for Disclosure, where I felt like authentically myself. I'm thinking about moments when I felt like I was just like Laverne, like without any like polish or just like this is what it is. I feel like that now, which I'm very grateful for. So thank you for that. So I think it's when I'm able to be in relationship with energy. And sometimes it's from another person, but sometimes it's from work. Sometimes it's I'll hear a podcast or I'll hear a meditation or a talk, and I feel it's about being in relationship to energy that allows me to unzip and just be and be.
Tell me one of your favorite quotes.
One. I have so many favorites, but one of the ones that come to mind that it's been really pivotal for me is it's a take on a concept from Brene Brown. Basically, like in Brene's work, if you know it, she talks a lot about shame, but she also talks about wholehearted people. And she basically after doing years of interviews, she came up with a group of people who she called wholehearted. And she says that these people live and love with their whole hearts, and that they go through the same struggles as all the rest of us, but they do it from a place of worthiness. And she said the only difference between wholehearted people and the rest of us is that they move through life's challenges and they do not put their worthiness on the line. Worthiness is a birthright, and so even as they have these challenges, their worthiness is off the table. I'm always worthy. And so for when I lived in Studio City, I printed out this statement this statement is, I can move through life's challenges and not put my worthiness on the line. Worthiness is a birthright. And so that is what I sort of came up with from her work. And I think that piece of my worthiness is God-given, and it's not something that anybody, any circumstance can take from me. And that is something that is it's like I need to hear that over and over and over again, because an internet comment, losing a job, being rejected here, being stood up by a guy or ghosted by a guy, the dating thing can really put your worthiness on the line. The fastest way to not feel like a star is to go on Tinder. And to try to date heterosexual men or straight identified cis men. It's like, I think however you identify, that is but I can move through those challenges and not put my worthiness on the line. I can move through life's challenges and not put my worthiness on the line. Worthiness is a birthright.
Yes, girl. And not only can we not ever allow someone to take our worthiness away from us, we can also not rely on other people to give our worthiness to us. It was a quote, I'll misquote it, but it was something that SZA said, I will never believe that I'm as good as people say I am, and I will never believe that I'm as bad as people say I am either. It's great.
Yeah. So in the middle, Kerry Washington said something similar. She said, if I believe the good critiques or criticism about me, the good stuff, I have to believe the bad stuff too. So
I love that. Yeah, I love that. What do you celebrate or love most about yourself?
That I'm still here.
Oh, honey.
That I found a way to survive and even thrive in a lot of ways, that I'm still here.
That's a gift. All of us have intuition. And it comes in many different forms, but to me, it's always the voice that whispers to me first, and it's usually the loudest. What is whispering to you the loudest right now?
That I have to prioritize my health. If I want to step into the life that God has intended for me, I have to prioritize my health and well-being above all. And that is requiring one of the hardest decisions I probably have to make in my life. But that it is worth it, because it's about the reason I'm here. It's about living a life that is vital and full, and me being able to show up fully for this big, beautiful life that my higher power has given me.
That's beautiful. All right, everybody, we are out of time. Thank you for tuning into my frequency, and thank you so much to my phenomenal guest, Laverne Cox, for having this conversation with me.
This is like a pre-therapy session, but almost 2 hours. Work, Jeffrey. You're amazing. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see you in person again. We should just talk on the phone or something. This is gorgeous.
Always here for you. And when some of these restrictions ease up, I would love to have you back over to the house and have a little 6-foot socially distance in the garden. It would mean so much to me. I just adore you. And I'm leave you, Laverne, with some words of light that one of my dearest friends, Brita Wool, has left me with. I just want to let you know that I love you, and I think you're doing a great job.
I love you back.
And if I can leave you all with one thing, it's this. Celebrate yourself and love each other. I'm JBC, and I love you.
Remember to subscribe, rate, and leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or however you tune into our frequency. You can support us by sharing this episode with a friend and spreading the love with each other. You can find us at conversationswithothers.com and reach us at Conversations with Others on Instagram, at CWO Podcast on Twitter, and Conversations with Others Podcast at gmail.com. Our outro song is Looking for Another by Brittany Allen.